Hey guys, Asian Kyle here, bringing you the long-awaited review on my Small Sebenza by Reeve knives. Let's just get a really fast macro of this and then we'll jump right into it. I know if you're watching this video, you're either A, considering getting one, B, wondering why people would waste their money on a knife like this, or C, yours is in the mail, actually, or D, you just bought one and you just want to reaffirm your purchase, and all of those reasons are perfectly valid. I hope to answer especially the question, why is this knife worth $350 whopping dollars? I mean, we're starting to get into the range of a pistol and price on tag on this, and definitely shotguns, but for a knife, let's answer that question today. I mean, this knife is absolutely gorgeous. There's a nice shot of the lockup on there, which honestly hasn't moved a whole lot, barely in a break-in period. Back of the knife, pocket clip, rides right on the lock bar. You know, the top of the knife, nice jimping right here. That comes up a little bit. And this, as Nut and Fancy calls it, a volcano thumb stud, which isn't my favorite, but it is what it is. Let's go and dive right in, and we'll start by talking about the blade of the knife. First and foremost, the thing that immediately draws your eye is this blue thumb stud. It's just such a beautiful contrast in comparison to the stonewash on the blade, as well as the bead blast on the scales itself. One thing that I find really interesting about this is if you look at this side, it's starting to wear, and this side it's wearing a little bit, but definitely on the very peak of the thumb stud. I don't know why it's wearing off. It is what it is. It doesn't really bother me that much. It did at first, just because if I spend this kind of money on a knife, I want the finish to last. But it's a user, and that's part of the reason why I waited this long to do this video. I wanted you guys to see, after a year of carry, what the knife looks like and how it wears. But yeah. Secondly, the stonewash on this knife is just gorgeous. And if you don't know what I mean, go ahead and pop in and watch my video on the Benchmade 940-1, as well as my Tad Dauntless and Why I Returned It videos, and you'll see what I mean. This stonewash in comparison to the others, and then as you see here, I'm rolling in some photos just so you can get a nice good comparison. This stonewash is absolutely gorgeous. It is the best stonewash I have ever seen. It's so evenly done. You don't see any grind lines behind the stonewash or anything. Let's see if I can get even closer. I mean, you see my fingerprint oils before you see any grind lines on this knife. This stonewash is amazing. This is the best stonewash I've ever seen, and it's got the most attention to detail on it that I've ever seen. And then it is completely even. It's even in the parts back here behind the scales that you can't see. The stonewash is just superb. Just absolutely gorgeous. The next thing that we're going to see here is this rounded spine, as you've seen in photos of the Sebenza, as well as other videos if you've been watching them. And the spine is perfectly rounded. It's not sharp in any way, and it feels nice. Everything about the blade on this knife either A, looks velvety smooth, or B, is velvety smooth except for the edge. And that's going to bring me to one point about the edge that I really didn't like. We'll go ahead and use my trusty Delica here, and I'm going to switch hands so we can see better. When I got this knife, I pulled it out of the box and was just immediately blown away, and I loved it. However, when it came to the edge of the knife, this portion here, very sharp. Very sharp. Very, very impressed. However, we get to up here, and to be totally honest, guys, I've had gas station knives come sharper. It was very disappointing, especially when you spend the kind of money on this knife that you do. The tip region right here was very, very sharp, as it should be, and it's very easy to get to that level of sharpness on a tip of a knife. But the edge itself was dull for about half of it. I threw it on the sharp maker, and it's just something about the geometry of the edge. Now, I know they're hand ground, and that's the reason why, but it still to this day doesn't take a super keen edge right over here. I'm probably going to send this knife off one of these days to one of my Instagram followers who has been asking me to send it to him. I trust him a lot, guys. I'll go ahead and annotate him here in the bottom. He does change his Instagram often as far as the name goes, so I hope he stops that. You know who you are. But I trust him with knives, and I'll be sending probably all the knives I have left over to him at some point in time. He does great work if you follow him on Instagram and see him. So the last thing I want to talk about with the blade is just the kind of edge he uses. Now, there's been a huge not uproar, excuse me guys, but a resurgence going back to a full flat grind like we see over here on the Delica. And we can thank Mr. Nut and Fancy for part of that. These full flat grinds do slice very well, guys. However, the reason why Chris Reeve doesn't do a flat grind like this is if this is your edge, okay, and now this is a full flat grind edge. As the knife starts to wear, it starts to then become wider and wider to the point where now this is your grind, your primary grind, and right where the ends of my fingers are, you have to then bring it back to a point at the edge of your knife. And in doing so, it makes it a little difficult to keep such a fine edge, because now you're turning it into a greater and greater edge like this versus the grinds that Chris Reeve uses. There we go. That's about the best way I can portray it, guys, is it comes out at about like that. And I'll roll in a photo that better shows why this edge is more effective. But as you see in the photo, the edge becomes more consistent and more fine all the way to the very edge of the knife blade itself, and therefore you can keep your grind longer, and that's why he uses it. And honestly, guys, I really like the grind. It's done very, very well. Let's kind of work now towards the handle scale itself, and we'll talk about the pivot as we work that way. This pivot is awesome. Not only do all the screws use the same size tool, the pivot itself is just hugely beefy. It's just absolutely gorgeous, and it's so smooth, and that's partially thanks to the pivot as well as the washer uses. But I'm just going to barely push the lock bar out of the way, away from the knife, so that way it doesn't touch the detent, and there we go. I let the detent come back on to stop it, but there we are. This knife is so smooth, and that's partially thanks to, like I said, the washers, the pivot, and just the way it's designed. This is the smoothest knife I've ever owned. And in fact, the reason why it's so smooth like this is, we'll use the Delica again here. If this is the hole in your knife, what he does is he puts another little piece right in here that allows the knife to rotate freely like this. And that's where the pivot runs through, but it's captured. So that way the pivot screw itself is not touching the knife. Instead, the knife blade is literally floating free because of that. So it makes the knife just so buttery smooth, and it is just absolutely amazing. If anything you take away from this video, guys, this knife is the smoothest knife I've ever handled. And granted, I've not handled other ones coming from Ferrum Forge, which I hear are just as smooth, if not smoother, but as far as straight up production knives go, this knife is so smooth. Moving towards the handle scales themselves, this is where I find the knife really be worth its money. It's very expensive, but we're going to go and talk about the elements of design on this. The first thing that we see here is that the edges of the knife top and bottom are not perfectly straight. They've actually got some curvature to them, and on the top of the knife here, here's about the middle point, and it's so slight that it's kind of hard to detect at first, but when you start looking at the knife, you see it. It's visually appealing, and that's something I really, really enjoy about this knife. It's pretty to look at, if you can even call an inanimate object like this pretty, and it's gorgeous. Kind of the second thing I want us to talk about a little bit, we'll come right to the back of the knife here. We have this edge back here, which is where the primary cuts are in order to give the knife its shape, and then we have the top here, and then we have this bevel right there where the top and the side of the knife meet. But as you can see right here, this grind along that follows the entire edge of the knife to give it some smoothness stops and conforms around the lanyard tube, and it does it as well up here around the stop pen. This, guys, is just, it's beautiful, and it puts the knife in a different category, kind of not quite in the mid-tech custom area, but it gives it the extra flair that most production knives don't have. So this, in conjunction with the rounded spine, are just some of the things that just make this knife a little bit more special. It just gives it the little extra that people really like, and I'm definitely one of those people. It's just the little things like this is what gives this knife that extra personality and makes it worth the money. Something else to kind of note about the handle scales, and then we'll kind of roll into his tolerances. If you watch the Chris Reeve Blade HQ video, Mr. Reeve says the word tolerance. I'm not even kidding. It seems like about 50 million times. And it's not because his vocabulary is limited. It's because he really wants to get across the point that this knife is made to such tight tolerances that if it doesn't pass, it doesn't go. It literally gets sent back, and they do whatever they do with it, whether recycle it or give it away to their employees. I don't care. The point being, the tolerances on this knife are so tight. It is absolutely incredible. And to kind of start here, we'll start with blade play. Shocker, 0 blade play. It's never had blade play at all. And to be completely honest, there are no Loctite in any of these screws, and I've never had the knife loosen either. This is not a safe queen. It definitely isn't something I'm going to go and baton with, mostly because wasting a folder like that and that you would buy for $350 is foolish, and choose the right tool for the job. So I've never baton with it, and I don't plan on it. But there's 0 wobble, even way out here at the tip, nothing. No blade play at all. And even when we collapse the knife down, and this is where I've seen some quartermaster knives really start to fail, is there's barely any moving back and forth here. And I mean it so barely that you can only really feel it down in the palm of your hand when you secure the knife like this. It's just so slight, if anything. But still, no blade play, and a side-to-side motion this way. I mean, it's just absolutely perfect. Another thing that I found really interesting here is when we close the knife, right there, the blade tip is sticking out just a little bit, and then you finish it, and it disappears. I mean, his measuring tolerances on this are so tight that whenever you do that, you can see the blade right there, as it no longer is concealed by the handle, but then you pop it in. Perfect. The detent on this knife, in my opinion, is absolutely perfect as well. If you see and follow other knife makers on Instagram, as well as anything else, there's been a huge trend to have these just massively strong detents. They're just stupid strong. And I think that's ridiculous. Why do you need a knife that's detent is so hard you can barely overcome it, even with a very well thought out flipper? I don't know. It's ridiculous. And if you're a custom knife maker or a mid-tech maker, you should not make detents that are that strong. It's stupid. Spend more time making everything else about your knife better, not just your detent. The detent on this is strong enough to where it's going to keep the knife in. And I'm really trying, guys, and I'm not putting any pressure on the lock bar. And here we go, just to show you. There we are, finally. And that is really tough to do. The knife does not want to come out whenever you do that. I mean, let me just give it a more realistic, just drop. I've never had this knife drop and open, ever. Not once. The detent on it is just absolutely perfect. And to kind of give a little bit more of an example with that is when we start to close the knife, as it drops freely, we're just going to do this. Yeah, right. Oh, that was a really bad example, guys. Sorry, I jumped the gun on it. There we are. But about right there is when the ball detent sucks in. So that's so small. Maybe 1/8 of an inch or something. The ball detent sucks the knife back into place at just the right time, and it's perfect. So the detent is just absolutely amazing. I mean, his tolerances are great. And the last thing I just want to kind of talk to you as far as tolerances go is right back here. Let me just get my finger, and as you can see the blade, it is kind of tough to see. Since light isn't directly in it, but as you see right there, guys, I'm only sticking my finger in about, here we go, let me just try and get it this way. As you can see, it's really not much, and I'm touching the blade. The blade literally sits, and as I pull out my trusty Delica again, the back of the blade sits right there. I mean, the distance is so small, and he does that, and it's amazing. The tolerances are perfect on this knife. It's great. This knife isn't really a flipper, unfortunately. You can get it. I basically have to hold back here with my ring finger on that, so I don't put any pressure on the lock bar. It's not really a flippy knife. You can do it. See, it's kind of tough to do. Now, he doesn't recommend it, and honestly, I flicked this knife open quite a bit, guys, and the lockup has not changed at all. In my opinion, the lockup is right where it should be. It's right around 60%. And since Chris Reeve was the creator of the frame lock, or how it should be known, the Reeve integral lock, I don't believe that you should have a frame lock that locks up less than 40%. It becomes dangerous. I have full confidence with this knife, and I've shown people where I'll hold it like this and press against something, and the knife will not shut on my hand. When I hold this knife, as Glock says, confidence in hand, this knife gives me confidence in hand. It'll hold up to anything that I put it against. The size of it's really not too bad. I wear a medium-sized glove, mostly because my hands are small in the palm but long in the fingers. And the knife, I can get a full 4-finger grip, and it's comfortable. I'm not squishing. It's comfortable. And you can even, put it back here into the palm of your hand to get more grip. So, plenty of room. Still plenty of room. Plenty of room. And lastly, here we are here, so you can see right where my knuckles are. Plenty of room. This knife is a perfect size. And the carry use that I use this knife is for the office carry. It's just the right size to where it carries well in the office. It's big enough to get office tasks done, but it's not so big it doesn't scare anybody. It's not assisted or an auto, so it doesn't freak people out like you're going to go on a mass stabbing spree. This knife is it's perfect. To kind of give you a size comparison, we'll go ahead and pull out the Delica again. And we'll just kind of line it up. The Delica is a little longer in the back than it is in the Chris Reeve. And then lastly, the Kershaw Leek, which I will be doing a review on that one. It falls right in there with these knives. Now, of course, the Reeve is a little thicker than the Leek, for example, and the blade is definitely thicker, but that's totally okay. The knife carries incredibly well, guys, and the pocket clip on this knife is my favorite pocket clip I've ever used. I'm not worried that this knife is ever going to work itself out of the pocket clip because of this double dip right here. As you put the knife into your pocket, it clears this first dip and then sits up here instead of just, as we see here on a Spyderco, it's just got the one, as well as on my Leek here, it's just got the one. This pocket clip clears all my thick material jeans really easily. I've got a pair of Abercrombie and Fitch jeans and just incredibly thick denim, and it clears just fine. I do have issues getting my Leek into those pair of jeans, for example. This knife is just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, beautiful, and it makes a nice sound when it opens. Let's kind of talk a little bit about the wear and tear on the knife itself. The reason I waited so long in my review so you guys could see this. It's got a little bit of snail trailing on the presentation side, just a little bit right there as you saw that one. On the lock bar side, and of course the pocket clip. I will let you know that this knife only gets carried in my right side pocket with my phone. I don't put my keys there, I don't put my flashlight there, my pen doesn't go there. It is literally my knife or my phone or both. It's the only thing that ever goes in that pocket. And that's mostly because I don't like my knives beating up my phone. I've already had to replace my screen protector on my new iPhone because of this knife. It must have hit right here on the corner, but it cracked my screen protector, and that's the reason why I don't carry anything else in that pocket. I don't want my knife beat up my phone. I don't want my phone being beat up by keys or coins, whatever, and I definitely don't want a $350 knife being beat up by coins. But as we see, just the snail trails on it really aren't that bad. Very minimal. One thing I do want to note though is right here on the corners, how you see it's a slightly different color, it's a little shinier. Those do wear, and it's doing it as well on these corners, and definitely on this side of my pocket clip, guys. and that's just natural. The great thing about a Chris Reeve knife is it's got a lifetime warranty as long as you don't mod it. You can send it to them and they will re-bead blast the handle scale, so resharpen the knife. It does take a little bit away from the Idaho made, which in my opinion, I really like it. I do live here in Idaho now, and it's great to see that something of this quality comes from a state that people are like, where's Idaho? It's just amazing. This knife, in my opinion, is the perfect EDC. It's just big enough to get any task done that you could need a knife for. Cutting an apple, for example, opening letters, rope, whatever you can throw at it, but it's not overly large to where it takes up too much room in your pocket. And if we're completely honest with ourselves, guys, knives sit in our pockets about 90% of the time. And if we're lucky, they see 10% of use during the day. It's probably more realistic to saying they only get about 2% of our day's use if we're actually using it, not playing with it. I just have nothing but praises to sing about this knife. The only thing that I don't like about it is whenever I initially got it, the back portion of the edge here was very sharp. It was just lightsaber sharp. But towards the front, from about here forward, it was quite dull, and I couldn't get it on there to be sharp enough, but I'll go and send it off to get sharpened one of these days. This knife is just absolutely gorgeous. One small thing, if you guys do buy this knife, a lot of people rock it without the lanyard. I'm definitely one of those people, and if you listen to it, there is no shaking. When I got the knife and I took the lanyard off of it, but I want to keep the lanyard too because it follows with the blue theme of the rest of the knife, as we see here. It rattled. It rattled continuously. I actually got a good tip from the Apostle P about what he does with his, and right there you see just a little piece of blue paracord, and with both ends burned, and it no longer rattles. It doesn't rub up against this blue tube back here, if we can focus in on that. Yeah, it doesn't rattle up against the blue tube back here, so it doesn't scratch it, but the knife doesn't rattle anymore, and if you go with blue, you're never going to see it, and neither will anybody else. And that's pretty much it, guys. Other than the lanyard tube rattling and the first half of the knife up here being dull, I don't have any complaints about this knife. This knife definitely isn't for everybody. It's quite expensive. When I bought it from Knife Art, it was about $350, but as far as knives go, this knife for that price, I'm amazed that it doesn't cost more. His attention to detail is just superb, and from the time that Blade HQ filmed their video about the Chris Reeve knives, he went at the time and inspected each knife before they left the factory to get his stamp of approval. If he still does that, I'm not too sure why, or I'm not too sure if he does it anymore. I think he still does, but these knives are made just to the highest quality that I've ever seen. The blade centering is just absolutely perfect. It's never moved. There is no blade play. The handles feel great. They're not warped in any way, shape, or form. That's another thing. Let me just show you this real fast now that I see it. Kind of just with the handle scales. Right there, towards the ends, they come down further and come in a nice uniform little lines right here on both sides. It's just his attention to detail is absolutely gorgeous. Guys, if you've never held a Chris Reeve knife before, I really encourage you to find somebody who does, and if you do see somebody who has one, ask them if you can hold it. Now, don't be surprised if they say no, because it's very expensive. If you're a serious knife collector, you definitely need one of these in your collection at some point in time. If you're just getting started, don't worry, I promise you'll get there eventually. I never thought I'd be buying one of these knives myself. It's just absolutely amazing. If I lost this and had the funds to replace it, I would replace it in a heartbeat. The only thing that I kind of wish I would have done differently is instead of just getting the classic drop point, I kind of wish I would have gotten it in single blade style. There's just something about it that looks really cool, and it would probably be more useful for what I use my knives for in the office. But that's a really small complaint. Overall, guys, I give this knife a thumbs just way up. I would buy another one of these again in a heartbeat. It carries better than the 940 does, or did, as I don't have those anymore, unfortunately. It is just absolutely amazing, and there is a reason why this knife has stayed around in my collection when all the others have left. Guys, I really encourage you to get one. They are a little pricey, and at some points in time throughout the year, they are really tough to find. I know in the winter, or actually, yeah, winter and into the early part of 2015. So winter 14, spring 2015. These are really tough to find. So they're only made in limited batches per year, and they all do come with the birth certificate on it. Go ahead and pick one up if you can find it, and I hope this reaffirms either A, the purchase you made, B, if you're wondering why there's so much, or C, just hoping to get one that had entertainment value for you. But anyway, guys, this is Asian Kyle signing off, bringing you the Chris Reeve Small Sebenza review.